We are here back again on a Thursday for Think and Link, Pants Optional, where we leave it up to you. And we have a wonderful discussion planned for today. Amber and David, both with some interesting connections back to MIT and MIT Media Lab and Warby Parker. But that's probably not going to be a big part of the conversation because there's so many other things to talk about with them. We had a pre-call, and Kelly and I walked away from it going, I'm not sure I understood half of what Amber was talking about, but I was very excited to hear more. So I hope you have that same experience, and perhaps are taking notes in the background to figure out what on earth she's talking about, because it's wickedly cool stuff. It's definitely going to be talking about our relationship with technology, and there's probably some AR and VR and all related things in this conversation as well. But first, a moment for our two sponsors. First sponsor being Capsule, special projects firm here in Minneapolis, working on a lot of interesting projects in and around design, marketing, and brand. And our second sponsor, also an example of the kind of work that Capsule does, is the invention of a new chocolate. And Thomas will put that in the chat. It's called Verse Chocolate. It's doing quite well. And people are enjoying a lot of chocolate right about now, hopefully. I just had my dose for the day. And so those are the two major sponsors of our little gathering here. I'm going to hand it over to Kelly. But before I do that, for the first question for our guests, I want to make sure that everyone is on mute. You can definitely keep your camera on if you'd like, but definitely do the audio mute and questions in the chat as we get going with our guests. Please, plenty of questions in the chat. So first, I suppose I should hand it over to our guest to give their introduction, shouldn't I? Yeah. So Amber, do you want to start us off with an introduction and your background? That would be wonderful from my perspective.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Amber Case. I studied anthropology in college. I grew up in a tech family, so when I decided to go to college, my mom's best friend, who is a mathematician, said you should go get a liberal arts degree so that you can learn how to think and make better user interfaces for people if you're so obsessed with technology. And so I did that, but I'm missing a lot of like pop culture references because my parents put TV on the air and they didn't want to watch it when they got home. And then I was an only child and my parents were kind of hermits. So I kind of grew up with a sibling that was just an Atari computer. And then later I learned how to socialize through building forums and little social networks and things like that. So then I wrote this book called Calm Technology, which is finding what was at Xerox PARC, this research institute in the 80s and 90s, and just kind of trying to bring that perspective that was a bit ahead of its time back. And I've been on tour with that for like 5 years until the pandemic changed things. So yeah, that's about, I've done a couple startups too. That's been good. That's about good, cool. Reasonable that's introduction.
Atari, growing up with Atari.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've heard that. And a lovely way to grow up. Yeah, great. David.
Amber, I love that you're, I love that you are kind of promoting calm technology because it's such a wish that we all have. I just made the mistake of buying the most recent Apple Watch. I've done this twice before in the I bought the first one that came out and then I did one that like the third or fourth generation. And I'm interested in haptics and feedback and all the new sensors it has. So I feel like I have to try the most current one. But whenever I break it out, I always feel the opposite of calm because the watch just does so many things and doesn't actually show you the time very well. Like if you're biking and you're just trying to get if you're going to be late, you have to take a hand off the handlebars and then like do the flip the watch in order for it to turn on the display. And so I mean I'm a product inventor and And oftentimes, like, I'm trying to reduce products and services to become kind of as calm and as kind of specialized as possible. I think that's kind of one way out of complexity, is to kind of distribute functions instead of trying to converge everything into this. We're trying to actually take all the interesting bits of this and spread them out around your environment and around your world and around your person. Some of the things that I've worked on, this is the ambient orb, which changes color based on one thing you might want to track, like pollen count, or when the next bus is coming, or the stock market, I suppose, if you're obsessed with that. Or better idea is more like steps walked or how calm you are. This object is a internet connected medication packaging that has a push to refill button on it, kind of like OnStar, that gets you more of whatever you need. And it kind of just shows like how putting a sensor in an ordinary thing can spin up a whole new set of services and business models to auto refill things, to remind you through a text message, to subtly pulse with color, or maybe if you don't take this, it should signal it on here. That would be another calm ecosystem application. During the time of pandemic, I've been, after working at Warby Parker for 2 years and building some online eye testing service for them, and also thinking about kind of the future of glasses and what you could pack into the temples of glasses, like audio or sensing your emotional state. I've been at a product design firm called Continuum in Boston, where I get to be a futurist and work on provocations. Most recently, I've been working on using pose detection to help people work out in place. So in the middle of your conference call, you would get like a 7th inning stretch. So everyone's encouraged to like take a step back, and it looks at your skeleton and reads that, and then has you try to mimic a yoga pose or a stretch or just to try to get us a little more moving, since we're all so sedentary. That's a little bit.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, that,
Wait, I have a question.
right before
How
we
did you,
that's great.
how did you know that you wanted to become a product designer? Was there any special like thing in your childhood that happened where you're like, yes, this is...
Let's see. I mean, I think I always have an optimism and a wish to redesign the world. I don't know if anybody else feels that, but like as soon as you realize that everything around you is designed by someone, then you think, could I have done this lamp better? Could I have done this chair better? This is a guitar. Someone made the choice about 6 strings and about frets and about how to tune and about the size. Would this have been the guitar that I would have designed? Like, why not more strings? Why not fewer strings? Why not smaller and more portable? Like, I feel like you kind of, one of the things that Kevin Kelly wrote about in a book called What Technology Wants is to kind of appreciate that for any mature product category, you get, it doesn't converge like Johnny Ive wants it to, but instead it goes like a coral reef, where you get this massive diversity, specialization, and complexity. And so if you look at things like shoes, wine glasses, silverware, all of those things, you have incredible specialization and diversity. And it makes me hopeful as a product designer that any nascent product category won't converge on the perfect form, but will diverge on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of versions that are specialized for different uses and different people and different ways of expressing yourself.
I remember when I was a kid, I would just walk through the supermarket, and I guess I was learning about the Cold War. And I thought, well, the supermarket's the ultimate Cold War. Like, you have these battlefront lines that are constantly being drawn, and like these, especially the toothbrush aisle, it was all about like these very spiky creatures and all of these extra like fins and attachments so that they could fight better. And then product companies just taking up a certain amount of space, even if they didn't sell the product, to just hold people's attention. And I remember just kind of taking off my glasses and walking through the supermarket and being like, okay, none of it works on me anymore. This is great. Like, there was this overwhelm. And then I kind of saw, you got those product complexities. And like, I always think of things as fractals. Like, when you play a fractal over time, it gets really complex and then it empties out. And I thought, okay, I'm seeing like the saturation of complexity in these markets. And then like, one day I started going to the store, and there's like a health food section where everything's like simple truth, and all the packaging is really plain. And it's like, oh, the fractal tipping point happened, you know, and now it's like, well, now that will fill up with complexity again. It's like gluten-free, grain-free, you know, wild animal safe. Here it comes again, you know, and then it's just going to be like local, you know, or whatever it is. But it's just funny to watch that sort of thing. And then especially with technology too, where I feel like people had it all figured out. Like during the last pandemic, you had doorknobs that were made of like bronze or brass that automatically sanitize themselves overnight. You had the push button with your foot for a trash can, for the sewing machine, for your car. We lost the just the foot pedal. You know, even pianos had that.
Was the foot pedal a result of the Spanish flu?
I am wondering where, and because I keep thinking about, I'm going to go and look and see. Like, I feel like around the time of the Spanish flu, we had a lot of these don't touch it type situations.
Right.
And I don't know because I know that in history, a lot of these pandemics shaped like how much space we would have as people from each other, or like a lot of outdoor activities. Like, I was looking at this park, and there was a horseshoe pit. I said, I wonder if this was installed when people had to be socially distant from each other, you know. So I really want to look into that. But I wonder what happened. Like, why did we lose the foot pedal? Because Doug Engelbart, who made the mouse, his first mouse prototype had a foot pedal, so you could kind of like scroll down the page. And now you see it coming back a little bit, but you see it coming back in a specialized industry of professional gamers, where like they'll press it with their foot. They have a number of foot pedals so that they can like thank people on Twitch stream or whatever, because they ran out of limbs. You know, you don't want another thing. So just like these little tiny pieces, like where did they go?
Yeah, I really love you know, technology that has, or interface technology that has kind of headroom to grow in terms of expressiveness. Like the mouse is one of, like, if you think about playing an instrument that involves your whole body, like an organ, a church organ, like you're using hands, you have multiple registers, you're pulling stops, like it's athletic almost in terms of the reach of the body. You're using your feet, you're using your legs, like you can hear down to the 20 hertz, you know, like low notes. So like it does seem like interfaces today are very, very constrained, both in terms of the size of screens. You know, when I created ambient devices, that was all about kind of designing for peripheral vision, you know, designing for your pre-attentive space of what are those things that you could tune into that were like a color or a texture or a pattern that didn't occupy more cognitive load, right? That was like calm technology. And I think we're kind of starting to see that in terms of people are plastering more and more screens around. Like the mouse, like I have a Logitech mouse that has 2 or 3 buttons. My gaming 12-year-old has one that has like 18 things on it, and his keyboard is output as well. Most people think keyboard is input, but each of the keys has an RGB behind the key. And so when he's in certain games, the keyboard itself is like a sparse display. So I feel like the more we can kind of increase interfaces that engage more senses and more surround sound, there seems like a lot of expressive headroom there.
Yeah, actually, I was at a meeting with Sonos maybe 6 years ago, and I went into their smart connected home and broke everything because I'm good at breaking things. But one of these young, like, Silicon Valley engineers, I was talking about their product roadmap. They're like, yeah, we're going to take off the volume button because we want to have less buttons because Steve Jobs says less buttons. And I said, okay, and you're going to have the volume be controlled through Wi-Fi. So you can control it through your phone, which means you have to open your phone, swat away the 10 alerts that you have in the software update, dismiss that, get distracted by a work email, go into the Sonos app, log in, get your password wrong because there was a security breach and you had to change it last week and you forgot about it, finally get into the app, remember which Sonos device you're trying to turn the volume down on, and then turn it down. And oh, the Bluetooth connection stopped working, so you have to repair, which means at an aggressive volume because it actually got turned up by somebody else in the house that did have the right Bluetooth connection that locked themselves in the room because they're mad at you. You have no control over your device and you have to go over and unplug it. You really want that scenario? Plus,
Right.
most people have a Wi-Fi outage at some point in their lives. And you grew up in Silicon Valley. Have you ever dealt with a Wi-Fi outage? Have you ever dealt with a piece of technology that's not perfect, that's not the latest device? Do you know that just blindly following somebody who, there's a couple buttons that are always left on the phone for a reason, and that's the volume button. I just got so angry. And I yelled at him in front of the room, and that was not nice. And I was just like, if I see you guys taking away these buttons, I'm going to be really mad. Like, you know, eventually this person might win out because he's a very good storyteller. And the problem, I think, with a lot of futurism, not your futurism, David, but like a lot of these advertising-based futurists is like, they tell a very good story that's often very shiny, that's based on the Jetsons, where there's like, you're an upper middle class person and for you, everything always works because it's scripted, because it's an ad. But in real life, everything breaks. And there's beauty in how things break. Or it should be that, you know, an escalator, when it breaks, you can still use it as stairs. But a lot of these things are designed in a way that when they break, it's just, oh, well, we didn't think about that case. You know, like in my talks, I was talking about like this robotic pet feeder and how it was the feeding times and the feeding schedule was based on a remote server. And that server went down and these pets were stranded for a couple days. That's a life or death situation. And we love having these ethics councils, but ethics is not sexy. Ethics isn't even a requirement. Because we love this idea that everything is new, you know, like it's new, it's really cool. And it's like everything new has the same amount of problems as the old, but we don't know what problems that has yet. And we think that we can just get rid of ethics. Let's automate this, let's do this. And then we have to relearn in an almost Babylonian sense why to put ethics back in, why to have a backup plan. And I think we knew that in the last generation of technology that had physical buttons that were connected to a real thing with visibility where you could, at human scale, fix your car, fix your old rotary telephone. You could be an electrician and go in and fix. And now you've got something that not even an engineering team that's like larger than NASA, not even they can understand it. And it's like,
Yeah, the failing elegantly, I think, is a really good kind of important criteria. If you're in product design, like that's an important kind of use case to to solve for. And I think the answer I was going to tell people or consider there's a MIT Media Lab startup called Ori, Ori Home, or actually it's Ori Living. I'll put it in the chat. And yeah, here it is. And they're working on some robotic furniture for people to kind of make the large space hog furniture in your apartment disappears so you can have a better home office. Like there's a bed that is like a boat lift that flies away, or something like a library carrel that moves back and forth in order to get like a walk-in closet, or a kind of just stow the bed underneath a shelf system. And when we were prototyping it, the big question about interaction modality was, should it be an app that controls the motion of this? Should it be, we had this nice capacitive touch sensor where if you just, if you put your finger on it, it almost feels like you have a superpower, because it moves the whole, like you're moving something as big as a library carrel that you're used to like cranking around, but it just moves the whole thing just with a touch. And that felt really nice. We also had voice, like we had an Alexa hooked up to it. So you could say, sleeping time. We also had a schedule, so it would just do the right thing at the right time of day. And then there was also a gestural interface, so you could go like this, and the thing would move. And so in our testing, the question was like, well, what's the right modality for controlling this thing? And the answer was yes. It was kind of like climate change initiatives, that all of the above is the right answer. And I think building many ways to control and interact with the world is usually the right answer.
I have to say that we're at minute 24 and we have not asked a question yet.
We don't need to, but I'd love to. This is fascinating. I think we could just continue the discussion and just observe. But I'd love to jump in and just ask a question. We talked a little bit about this, Amber and David, on our pre-call or prep call. Would love to just hear your perspectives or share some examples of some of the enduring impacts that you're seeing during this pandemic as it pertains to technology, with a focus on the positives if we can, but just really hearing what you're seeing. And David, if you want to start.
Sure. Well, do you think the end of restaurant buffets and ball pits are like positive or negative? I guess that's a positive and a negative. Ball pits are good.
I think they'll all come back with a vengeance during our next roaring 20s, where we will seek to be really, really just, together.
Yeah, my list, my little list, virtual try-on. That's a big winner, like being able to see those glasses without walking into the store on your face. I think remote workouts are like certainly the funding for, the acquisition of, like what, Lululemon paid $500 million for Mirror, which then spawned Form, F-O-R-M-E, which is another one, and Tempo, and there's another one. I think that's kind of a brilliant piece of furniture that most of us want in the home, is, a mirror that can inspire us with models of how to Pilates or box or yoga pose, and then some feedback along the way. So I think that's a good one. There's a company in Cambridge called Hydro, which is kind of doing a Peloton for rowing, where you get to feel like you're out on the river on the rowing through Paris or wherever you want to row. So that's kind of a nice tourism meets exercise. I think the acceleration of remote collaboration tools is really exciting. Lots of kind of new ways to come together and play. I think, cleaning as theater is kind of an interesting one. I'm doing a workshop tomorrow for P&G about robots and automation of cleaning, and I think there's probably a lot of investment that's happening there. Another one that I've worked on is kind of this notion of health screening as a part of the fabric of the city. Like now, all of a sudden, you can do a health check. It might just be a temperature check, or it might be a temperature plus respiration plus heart rate variability, like on the way into the restaurant or on the way into the concert or on the way. But I really like how do you like diffuse healthcare ambiently into the built environment? That seems like it could be, feels like it's intrusive today, but I think that could be, it could be a positive. Do we have overlap, Amber?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
The one that I want you to talk about, can I give you one to talk about?
Yeah.
I think there's this really interesting kind of Faustian privacy for safety bargain that we're maybe more willing to give up in terms of contact tracing. And I wonder if that will have durable effects, or if that's just something that we're willing to give up now.
Yeah, our privacy is already dead. It's been dead the moment we got a piece of junk mail at our physical address. It's over. Everything is, you're in every database. Your password's already been hacked, probably like at least 12 times. And if you're a good hacker, you hack everything and you wait on that data because people aren't going to be incentivized to change their passwords. So yeah, it's already tracked. Like, I built a lot of the early mobile phone GPS tracking technology. Like, so the whole thing that we did was we just made it private by default, and we didn't store your data on the server. But, I'm sure that it's pretty easy to do, right? So I don't really worry about that. What I worry about is we have a society that, especially in the United States, is based on the puritanical notion of hard work, separation from people, a lot of seriousness, and not a lot of joy and not a lot of togetherness. You're only allowed to really be together at Thanksgiving, and then you have fight. It sounds really negative, but really we're a collective, and we're not even people. We're just a collection of microbes and weird things. We're just, I just don't even, in our ecosystem, right? So once we separated ourselves out of this natural state into this ecosystem, and we got out of balance, and we think ourselves as such individuals, yet we all act very similarly. I really want to think about human universals. When you think about people I'm going to make this system for this demographic. And I was like, why don't you make a Lego? It works for everybody except for people under 3. That's a pretty universal thing. That we keep, I think what this pandemic is trying to teach us is you guys are a collective. We're going to do the Black Plague for you guys. We're going to do Spanish flu. We're going to show you that you're a collective. If you don't learn this lesson, you try to work too hard, you try to fly too much, you're going to get in trouble, and there's a lot of us who don't even understand the notion of a collective, which is why I spend a lot of time in Japan. If you're sick in Japan, you wear a face mask to protect others from yourself. So the concept of wearing a face mask was never a big deal over there. And when I fly, if I'm sick, I always wear a mask, and I've been wearing a mask for 10 years. So
do you think the why you wear masks will flip in the US? Because I still feel like
we're still an individual country.
People are kind of more, they think about protecting themselves versus fear of contagion.
It's very odd when you protect others and when you give to others. There's a lot more that happens in that ecosystem. And we keep trying to learn this on the web. It's someone is you have to sign an NDA to work on my special project. I'm okay, is it one of Paul Graham's projects that he shared for free on Y Combinator about life-changing work? The implementation matters. The idea doesn't mean anything. And it's really upsetting to see people I have the great American novel idea, and then I hold it on this pedestal. And I was the only way to do it is you plant a lot of seeds and you wait for them to grow, and you find the better dirt. You really want to plant it in soil, which is different from dirt, right? And then you want to, it's just this whole ecosystem that you evolve alongside. You go to writers groups, and then you write short things, and you become a journalist, and eventually you write a book. It's a thing, and I think a lot of people are still in this individual sense And that really hurts everything, because now we have to all buy a vacuum cleaner and like a kitchen. And I don't advise communal living either, because that's utopian, right? It's like, oh, and we're going to be really great together. It's like, you guys you didn't even take like the INTP Myers-Briggs test to even understand like a
INTJ.
corporation. Sorry, yeah, INTJ. I'm like an INTP, but it changed. So like,
Wow.
when I'm managing, I'm like an ENTJ, but when I'm like myself, I'm an INTP. So there's like these two Jekyll and Hyde type situations.
I I have a hopeful kind of wish for another pandemic effect, which is, I think because of contagion, like there may be the possibility to kind of dignify the delivery people in our society, like to dignify all and kind of recognize the individualism of the people that are doing tasks that come in contact with us, because we kind of want to know who all these people are that we're interacting with. So like, I want the delivery to be a known person. I want to know that they're healthy, and I want to know their name, and I want to remember the fact that they were the one that delivered something, because that, like, I want that accountability. And so maybe there's hope in kind of recognizing and seeing people that are doing what we're kind of seeing as secondary
That's the
roles.
crazy irony about this age, is that in the past, you know, like I'll go visit my friend in Berlin that still lives like this. He's like, okay, I've lived on this block for 30 years. We have the butcher, we have the baker, we have, you know, there's no grocery store. It's all these individual small businesses. And we've known them for our whole life. So when my kid goes and runs around and plays, like if he gets lost, you know, the baker's going to bring him home, or like I'll get a phone call. And so there's this idea that the community is a resilient ecosystem that protects itself and is in homeostasis, and that it's affordable in a city to have your entire life and have a fairly middle class lifestyle running a bakery and have your family supported by that, or be an immigrant and be supported by, you know, a food restaurant of some kind, right? And now you have this idea that like, not only do you not go to the store to pick up things anymore, you get them delivered, that you don't have any relationship at all with, like, you know, you could have like a milkman before, which is like, you know, people would actually have a relationship with them, and that could cause problems. But now you don't even know their name, and you leave them an anonymous rating, you know, or you give them a tip, but there's not that depth. Like I have some friends in San Francisco, and I was like, you live right next to the Mission, like I keep going to the same places every time I visit you. I know the names of everybody who's making these burritos. Have you even been down the street? Like, you know, and they just kind of hired everything. It was like this techno-social womb where it's like, I'm going to press a button, this thing will arrive. And then they'll go down to South America and take ayahuasca to like kind of buy back the culture that they dissolved through making interfaces. And they're like,
irony.
I know, it's like, I need to
irony.
be connected. It's like, the whole thing was pretty reasonable. And now it's like, is anybody really connected? Like, who are you connected to? What does it mean? Is there depth? Do we even get allowed? Like, that's the thing, is like, are we being infantilized in that we aren't allowed to experience the depth of our own reality? Like, now we finally get to learn how to make bread in the pandemic, and it's satisfying. Wow, who thought that it could be satisfying? Like, I would like to have a garage, and I would like to maintain my own car, and I would like to have a wood shop. And I was the last generation to have a wood shop in my school. And I loved it because there's an idea that you as a human can deal with a very dangerous tool that could kill you. And that based on how you approach it and the respect that you have for it, you can work alongside the tool and at human scale produce something wonderful. And now it's like you're an infantilized person that can't even work alongside a software for more than a year because it changes on you, and you don't even get to know how it works. You can't even change it for yourself. And it's yeah.
Speaking of the kind of infantilizing and the irony of technology that helps us kind of do things that we could have done alone, like, what do you think of the I just put in the chat sprouts.io, which is another Media Lab spin out that it's using computer vision to like look down at your lettuce or your pot or whatever it's looking at, and make sure that it's growing according to plan, and then it's aeroponic. It's like a asthma inhaler, like it spritzes a little bit of juice onto the root structure of your lettuce in order to grow it super fast. Like, do you feel like that's kind of a funny irony there as well?
I love automated agriculture ideas. And I love the idea, like I either love like the really small farms, where, it's like any of my friends that have like had an exit for more than like 10 million, they all have a farm. Everybody's got a farm. They're like, we want to go back to the original software that like grows from the ground. It's like, most of you guys don't know anything about soil, and so you're operating at a loss. You do need the 10 million to survive with a farm. And then you have, I love this video from, I think it was like from 1930, and it's got a farmer that's 80 years old in the video. And it's like a capsule of this past. And this guy's got this old accent. And he says, I don't mind work. Like, this is play. Like, I really enjoy hanging out here for 80 years being a farmer. And there's this like joy in that labor. And when I talk to my friends who've gotten to the farm, they're like, yeah, our lives have meaning now. There's this goodness. And I thought, a future of farming, like my dream would be to have a bug farm, because we factory produce our animals, but bugs are already basically colonized. So we could just factory farm bugs, and I'm also thinking about like the growing cat and dog population, how they're eating a ton of meat, and it's like really bad meat that you can't feed to humans. And so they're screwing up all this, they're contributing to carbon footprint and climate change. So, but they could eat bugs, and we could grow them automatically.
I went to a conference one time that was at, it was in wine country, like in Sonoma at the Culinary Institute. And I got to eat something that was made with grasshopper flour. Mm-hmm. And it was right after a talk about how much less water it takes to grow grasshoppers versus wheat.
I
so
think
let's actually fun. One of the questions that Kelly, that you sent out was about, which I'd love to dive into, was your first question about when does technology become humane, or what? Actually, can you restate it?
More human. So how does technology become more human? Because that an oxymoron.
Can I my snarky answer to that one, which I'd love to riff with you on, Amber, is I think technology becomes more humane like when it doesn't try to become human.
Yes, 100%.
I feel like this, like you avoid the uncanny valley, border crossing violations. You and I think the way that you do that is you show you reduce your like hubris to think that you can do anything that's close to general AI. And you instead focus on very like specific little pin spot solutions to things. And you show the mechanisms, like you show how it works. Like you don't make inscrutable black boxes that say, oh, we've trained this AI to offer fashion advice. Trust us, it's up to date. And that outfit looks better on you than than this other outfit. Like that's totally inscrutable. But if it's kind of more bespoke or kind of tool-like, and it's augmenting what we want to do as humans, then I think it doesn't solve it. It doesn't slide into the zone of not being human and appropriate for the way we want to live. At least that's my sense. I mean, I was going to go grab something in the kitchen, like one of my favorite tools, that really shows like the hand of the maker too.
Mhm.
I think that's like another way of doing it, is like, these are all made by humans, and all these tools are made by humans, and so they should have the personality of the maker, the hand, the craft, the materiality. Like, I think that's how technology doesn't veer off into not being humane.
100%. Yeah. I think about technology at human scale. Like, again, I go over to Japan and I see like the Ontayaki, which is like, it's just a way of making pottery. So you go to a hill, you get your dirt out of the hill, and then you take it over to a pit, and you have these giant levers of trees that are powered by the water that go up and down and crush it. And so the machinery is working with the river alongside humans. And then when it's crushed, then you go in and you do all these human scale processes and you make this wonderful pottery. And the pottery is listed under, like, it just says, it has a stamp of the village. It's a collective. There's no individual, sign in the bottom of their bowl as if it's a unique piece of art. But they've been doing this for like at least 500 years. And some of the villages have been doing it for much longer. There's still architecture firms and building maintenance companies that have been around since like 800. Kikuman's been around for 500 years. So there's these long running, I think, when people think of like indigenous people, it's like, well, you still have these indigenous aspects, right? You still have this idea of a human alongside nature, and all of that tradition. And then when that goes digital, you still have the concept of omotenashi from the Japanese tea ceremony, which is the host anticipates your every need and gives you the thing before you need it. Now, when we warp this into the United States perspective, we get an AI that assumes that you need something that you don't because it knows you. When it goes into the Japanese perspective, you get a train station with a little tiny box that if you get lost, a real human comes out of the wall to help you with the machine and presses the buttons for you. And that idea is that the backup, when it fails really beautifully. And I think one of the only companies that kind of got that right in the States was Zappos. They said, we're going to allow you to buy shoes online. And everyone's like, yeah, right, they're not going to fit. And they say, yeah, but we're going to make that failure of fit so delightful that you can order and not feel guilty about ordering 5 or 6 pairs of shoes, trying them on and sending them back. And it was that perspective that I think was very interesting. That, the human scale is, and these human universals, like, you end up with systems that are delightful. You end up with these wonderful kitchen tools. It's like, you go to I still think about it funny, like, again, when people make money, they don't want to buy an automated shoe. They go to Italy and they get a shoe made for their foot by an artisan. Like, celebrities do this too. It's like this idea of when you make enough money, then you can afford something made for you by a human that has 800 years of history, that fully understands all of the permutations that you might go through in your life because it's informed by humanity. And replicating that with a computer and expecting that company to last more than 5 years and then pass on that information generationally is intense, because when I think about, like, people talk about databases and blockchain, I was like, well, that's elders. Elders are the original Oracle databases and blockchains. Tribal knowledge going back 2,000 years about like where to put your home because there's a tsunami that happens a certain amount of time. Like, that is also software. And ritual is also software. And people are like, oh, but if it's not written up in a scientific research paper, it's not true. And it's like, here is a ritual where you take a cow skull and bury it in the ground and you dance around it and chant. Nobody in that tradition is going to say, well, how the cow head breaks down to provide really great things for the soil so that we plant next year. They don't want to say that. They just have a kid go, and it's a fun ritual. And they hide all that complexity, just like when you press a light switch. The light turns on. You can be 5 years old. You don't need to be an electrical engineer, but there's something where it's like, okay, we know that this works. It's been put into the ritual. It's all good. We don't have to, even like burning sage in your house, right? For clarification, like now there's been scientific papers like, actually it takes out some of these, and then all the people who are like, yeah, we've known that for 1,000 years. But I think there's this divide where we think, oh, the thing is old. It's like, no, if it's evolved alongside somebody for 300, 500, 800 years, then there's something to be said for that. Because if you need a global supply chain to deliver you a complicated tool, do you really need that tool? You know, and what tools are we going to have in 100 years? They're probably going to be the original tools, or some German built or some Swiss built tools, some old Japanese tools, any of these cultures that have, you know, that have stayed in business because wealthy people want these things, because there's humanity in them, there's beauty in these objects, and they're functional too.
Hey, Kelly, do you want to take questions for, like, is somebody who's here working on a specific project and want to ask a question of a, you know, a design challenge or something you're thinking about?
Sure. I'm actually scrolling through our audience questions to see. It's more statements than questions. But John Lure, let's see what he's saying here. Maybe this is more thought, but one of the great drivers of innovation across all categories throughout time, he says, albeit exponential in the last 8 to 10 years, is the powerful driver of personalization. Any thoughts? Amber, David, you want to take that one?
I'll start with that one. Everything is personal. We're going to personalize it to you. And it's always like a big company. You know, it's like, is a supermarket personalized to you? No, it makes money because it's depersonalized, because it's an abstraction of nature. And they try to make a faux, like, original marketplace in like the produce aisle. It's like, yeah, this is not a farmer's market. This is, you know, this is a bunch of stuff that's been shipped over on pallets from Australia so that you can have your strawberries in the wintertime. Great. Now strawberries are rendered meaningless because they're not scarce. And there's no strawberry ritual or festival around it to like mark some memories in your life. It's just a strawberry. It like totally neutralizes the power of any of these objects. And then when you have personalization, it's like your screen is personalized for you. I didn't personalize it. Somebody assumes. So what I have to do to even get the ads that I like is I have to say that I'm a guy born in 1970 to even get ads that are of interest to me. Because if they did the facial recognition, they're like, oh, you're a female, you must like Sephora and other makeup type companies. It's like, no, I don't. Like, I don't, you know, and so the personalization's like, if you're in control of that, right? Like if I'm in a wood shop and I build this special thing into the corner, I can build my own environment. I can personalize it exactly to me. And I like to tour people's wood shops who've been around for like 50 years in that wood shop. Everything is about how long their arms are and when they turn around their favorite tools. And it's all these Delta machines. Like they fall in love with the tools and they adapt them. But with personalization, there's an assumption that some other company that has never done the proper user research can adapt something to us exactly. When they make those assumptions, that's when it just makes me go crazy, right? Like even the Apple Watch is like, we've customized to you. It's like, wait, you don't even know me. And then they're like, and now there's this idea that like, we're going to give all of our privacy away so that it can be customized for us. Why don't these apps and systems literally allow you to customize? Like even in a video game, you can customize more than a lot of modern software and a lot of these objects. And so I think that's that notion of personalization is just, there's a lot of these buzzwords that we get used to, and these become these kind of persistent architectures, like almost tonsils that we cannot remove, that don't do anything for us at all. And we keep going back to them, like the idea of like, everything should speak because we saw Star Trek and everything spoke in Star Trek. It's like, well, it's a lot more charismatic to make a computer speak for film, you know? And so we have this idea of the Jetsons and all this stuff. And then we make these fundamentally unusable architectures where you have to act like a robot to even get it to do what you want. And they're only useful for a very few things, and they're mostly parlor tricks. And then we keep doing personalization. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Oh, no.
That's good. So I've got a question for you, and it relates to that. And when you say you're a futurist, you talk about the future, and there are films that are made about the future, right? And there's dystopian versions, and then there's utopian versions of those, right? And it feels like they almost like set cultural guidelines or boundaries, like, well, we don't want to go down there, we don't want to be the giver, or we don't want to go down there, we don't want, but we should do Star Trek, right? But yet, or a Space Odyssey, which I put in one of my questions back to you, that it's curious what we pick out as utopian or how it's presented to us as a view of the future, yet it might not be. And I want to, I guess, because in something, David, you had written or talked about, it seemed like a Space Odyssey might be a nightmare for you, based on actually both of you, based on what you've talked about, right? It looks horrifying to me. Looks more like a dystopian future than a utopian future.
Well, I think we like, Amber talked about a tea ceremony where, how do you say it again?
Omotenashi. Yeah.
Omotenashi, like where the host anticipates needs. And I think we all like the idea of an AI that understands you better than you understand yourself and can understand your wishes and dreams and goals and can take care of you even despite your nature. Will change the lighting in your apartment so that you're just naturally tired and you go to bed and get enough sleep rather than staying up too late watching The Crown or whatever we're watching these days, Queen's Gambit. And until the point at which it doesn't open the pod bay doors, that's the moment where like, oh crap, like the thing that was taking care of me in kind of like a paternal, the best, that really understood all of the things that I should be doing. It's all good until you lose control, like that. And so I think that's what we're afraid of in terms of these technologies. But again, like I feel like that's such a far distant, like something that we shouldn't worry about, that we shouldn't as a society worry about. In the same way that Amber's not worried about privacy, like I am not worried about, robots gaining sentience and
I'm not worried at all. It's not a thing.
Yeah.
It's fake. The whole, and most of the industry is fake too. AI is not even a real thing. There's a very few people working on AI, and the whole thing is like, why do you expect a computer to be a human? It's a different species. It's like expecting a dog to be human.
I mean, AI is able to do some kind of incredible things, like
yes,
helping doctors not make mistakes.
Yes.
For example, like not giving you 250 milliliters, but that's more like an algorithmic guardrail.
Yes. Yes. And it's alongside you too. You're administering the drug and it's helping you with some clarity or with some vision, or like all of the machine learning algorithms for Google. It's like working alongside you and all of the human information that's coming in a feedback loop. And then you make the choice in the Google search for what you want. But if we just replaced AI with algorithms, except for some of the really cool deep learning stuff, I think we would avoid another AI winter, which we always seem to have, right?
So why do you think that happens? Like, why are we so like far out in the sci-fi world as a culture? Is it just too easy to extrapolate forward and say, yes, well, if Alexa like works 82% of the time, like she's about to start, like she's going to satisfy my conversational needs better than my wife very soon.
Right. And like, that's never going to happen, right? Because, okay, so I think I've been studying this for a while. There's a bunch of different reasons why. The first idea of a robot, which is like an indentured servant, on stage was Rossum's Universal Robots. And this was like a Czechoslovakian play. So the idea is that early on you had, you know, man versus nature, right? And you had man versus man versus animal, right? And so on a stage play, it's pretty easy to make all of those ideas. And then you're like man versus technology, and your human scale technology is not going to kill you, right? Like you tilling the field with an ox, probably not going to die. But when technology started to come through in the Industrial Revolution, you had to represent it on your stage play and in film. And in doing so, the kind of android robot showed up. It's like, oh, we are worried about technology replacing us. And the embodiment of that is to make technology look like a human. And that aesthetic stuck, of that natural fear that like we would be replaced by a machine. And in reality, in places like Manchester and the cotton gins and all of these things, we were enslaved by technology, and we still are. We're all working for Facebook for free. And that like nervousness of that became the overarching aesthetic. And then it was based on really social class. If you have a high social class, you get utopia. If you have a low one, you get dystopia. Dystopia is much more honest and much more easy to create narratives about, because it's so easy to be critical. And then you had Star Trek come along, where it's like all these people in a user experience design system by a user experience designer make the LCARS system and the thing called PAD, PADD, and all these people were watching this, and then they went on to like work and make, you know, Microsoft and Apple and things like that. So I think that Star Trek was more of a real sustainable utopia, and that it had a bunch of people from different classes and backgrounds and nationalities that still held fast to those traditions while being in space, and still had traditional weddings. But because there was a diversity of the crew, like a real diversity, anything that happened would actually be okay, because somebody from the crew could save it, you know, usually Data, but he could be compromised. But still, it's like you had that voice, right? June Roddenberry's wife's voice. And it was often a female voice, because when things started to get automated, they're like, well, you have a secretary, so we're going to automate your secretary. It's really anybody with wealth is going to still have a secretary and pay them a lot of money, because they're invaluable members of society. And then you had this idea of like, you know, mother as a service, or, you know, any of these things. And so we got this aesthetic, and then the Jetsons and all the space age stuff, that instead of colonizing outward, instead of going to the moon, we colonized inward. All the stuff that we built to go to space, and nuclear reactors and all that plastic, we used to like automate and scale stuff up. So we couldn't do ivory anymore. The billiards revolution was going on in the 1930s. Somebody made a competition to like make artificial ivory. That became the first plastic. Then we had infinite reproducibility of objects, and then we had these narratives that keep sticking in journalism because it sells newspapers. You're not going to buy a Wired magazine without a cool Terminator on front, because putting Google on front's kind of boring. The fact that you're interacting with so many automatons every single day.
You're saying the demands of making a good stage play kind of get us into this platonic view of robot as android, as threatening us. Although, like, if you do take Minority Report and you do take like the what all of my students in the Media Lab like want to make, these kind of gestural interfaces, like that, I thought that is a little prescient in terms of, the precogs as data, as big data that is trying to do predictive crime, and they're trying, like, that is profiling, to say the probability that the crimes happen in this neighborhood by these people, like, that's a real concern, isn't it to you?
Oh, it's 100%. And the thing is, if you got sociologists to go in there and be like, okay, there's a blood crypt war going on, how about we go in and we like solve this war so that we don't have a bunch of people killing each other retributionally for the next 3 generations. Like yes, it's correct. Like the one of the first waking up moments for me was when the big geography as a service company, Esri, I was a pretty depressed kid unless I was learning. So my parents took me to this camp at like age 12, and I got to learn this new geography service. called Esri. And later I made a startup and they bought my company. So it was this weird thing, but they showed me, they said, put your zip code in here and we'll show you your demographic. And so all the kids in the class put their zip code in, and it said that they'd make 150K a year as doctors and lawyers. I put my zip code in and it said that I would not graduate high school and that I would make less than 20K a year.
Wow. Like
So
social determinants of
it's very accurate. It's super accurate.
Zip code as
Scary.
But if you show a kid that and you give them control of that and you say, here's the fourth dimensional view. It's basically like my first experience with the fourth dimension. Like, here's your future. Here's being able to like zoom out of the map and have a perspective. Yeah. What steps can you take to not have that happen? And so it was like this whole thing of like, I need to go.
But no, I don't want to cut you off. What were the steps that you needed to take in order to not have that future?
Well, partially, that's why I got the degree in anthropology, sociology, because I was like, oh, there's a bunch of different levels where you can make that map and you can say, okay, it sucks here. But the lower level is like looking at why it sucks and doing repairs, like, or like, oh, this area will always get hit by hurricanes. Great, but if you planted a bunch of oysters in there and you restored the wetlands, the hurricane risk would go down by 300%. And, and it's like, and if you just talk to like anybody indigenous from the area, all you have to do is be like, so what did you do? And they would be like, well, if you had us maintain this lake or this land or this river or this forest, you wouldn't have these giant ecological cataclysms that, they already had it all figured out. And so for me, I was like, how do I jump ship? How do I jump social classes? In the United States, there's always the idea that we're all just temporarily, one day we could all just make $1 million, right? It's easier if you're an immigrant, than actually doing it. But you're really stuck into geography, and that geography plays a huge role. And so for me, it was like, how, I ended up doing all these at-risk youth programs. Mayor Wellington Webb, when I was 14, I did an interview and I got hired to make websites during the .com boom when I was 14. He was this African-American mayor. He made this new department to get kids off the street. Totally changed my life. And so often, like, you have kind of like an angel that comes down from like another class and like enfolds you into their system. But I still have all the issues. Like, there's all these like 20 things that keep lower class people down, right? So you could win the lottery and be more broke than you were before, because, a middle class person's going to put some of it into a Roth IRA, and they're going to put it in this other 401k. They're going to save some of it. They're going to do the tax exclusions. They're going to buy a modest house. They're not going to tell anybody. And a poor person's going to buy a mega mansion for all their friends, and then not be able to pay the property tax. So
you believe in kind of like showing people their predicted future, like show people their destiny.
Absolutely.
I was on a call this morning with somebody in Kentucky saying, because of tobacco, because there's a lot of tobacco in Kentucky and North Carolina, because of bourbon, because of sedentary just practices, like more people have cancer, more people have COPD, more people obstructive pulmonary disease, more people have cardiovascular issues in Kentucky than any place else. And we want to show people that, and the project was about like, could we show with AR, like you hold up your phone and we show your laboring heart and we show the hypertension's effect on your eyes and your kidney and your risk of stroke in the brain. Like, could we actually, vividly on your body, show your body, show through your body, and not just for fashion, but to try to really motivate behavior change. He was even saying the chance, like if you have a neck that has a circumference of like more than 17 or 18, like you could measure that with a Snapchat lens, like right away.
Yeah.
With Snapchat lens, I just have to show my solution to
Yes.
I've
Yes.
been I'd love can somebody give me feedback on this idea, which I feel like if you're on Zoom too many hours a day, you're exhausted, right? Because it's not exactly clear why, but it feels like there's the presenting yourself, the thinking about what you look like and interacting with other people is just like takes a lot of calories. And a lot of people say, well, I try to do as many calls as I can. I try to do calls while walking. But maybe there's some kind of in-between avatar representation of us that gives us a little bit more of a, breathing room so that we are being represented. And you do benefit by getting kind of the secondary signals of, are they present? Are they not present? What's the facial expression? What's the gaze vector? What are people looking at? But without feeling like you have to be presenting all the time. What do you think about like a anime or animoji view?
It's interesting. I just feel like if we all colored our screens, if there was just like something that could make everything the same kind of nice amber color.
Like a duotone kind of?
Yeah, just like something really simple. So everybody kind of had the same visual harmony. It'd be a lot less taxing to look at. I'm not looking at a bunch of people. I'm looking at a bunch of ecosystems, right? Each of you is that's amazing. Each of you is like in your own world. Plus I'm looking at myself in this visual, like our world is so visual that it's just like, all that visual extra, it's like, this is not helpful, right? I'm looking through a window at a hotel with like 20 different windows, and I'm looking at 20 different channels of television. You look at like David Bowie and the man who fell to earth, and you've got him watching like 50 TVs at the same time. It's almost, like that. That's very calm. My mom worked in TV. She was a master control operator, so she would watch multiple channels at a time and put them on the air. And it's a very stressful, taxing job that you go home at night and you're like, I don't want any more visual stimulus. And yet we're all basically master control operators, dialing in our channels and scheduling our TV shows all day long. That we have, my mom had to leave that job because she got automated. And so I watched my mom get automated when I was a kid as one of the first generation blue collar automated workers. I watched my dad automate the TV stations until there was nothing left to automate, and he got stuck in Cleveland, Ohio, and then died of cancer early from all of the like technical equipment that he played with and all of that, the cancer causing stuff. And he did have a neck with this giant circumference, and he did have sleep apnea, and he wasn't showing, even on his deathbed, I was like, I need to give you some acid. I need to tell you some things. And he's like, oh, that's illegal. I can't take it. And I'm like, just, like you didn't even get to live your life. You're like 56, and it was this very upsetting thing of like, you could have changed 2 or 3 things in your life, like actually exercised and had a wonderful, beautiful, just great life. And instead, every time there was a choice in the road, you chose the wrong one. But it wasn't his fault. The social class that he was in, that kind of fractal pattern that was producing him based on his geography. His early choice was that he could work in television in Denver or he could work in television in Los Angeles. And he didn't take the LA job, even though he had friends in the industry. And so he went, that industry is diminishing. So this was my first ideas of like futurism, which is like, I can look at an ecosystem, project out where it's going to be, and see how it's going to kill people, and I think, with this, just being a master control operator now, which is what my mom did for a living, that's been democratized. Also, it's not been democratized. Now you're doing that and you're your own travel agent, and you're not working with the expert, right? A travel agent's an expert. They're going to get you a really great deal. There's a human relationship. And now you're doing the automated checkout thing at the store. It's not automated. The automation and the labor is pushed to you. You're the one that has to look up the PLU for the fruits. You're taking longer, and they can hire less people, and you're just isolated, and then you have somebody will punch in the number for you as a human backup. Like it's these kind of ideas that things are automated or better or whatever, but they really aren't. And I think it's going back to your question about how did it get this way, it's just this narrative that we keep telling that's like tonsillitis, that we need to be like, okay, the vision of the past and our idea of the future is holding us back. What's a real future? In a lot of ways, like I like the term cosmotechnics, because it's about what each culture brings to the table in terms of technology. The Japanese have their own technology. They have their own indigenous technology. Every country has it. And if we work at that level, then we can realize more futures than just the Jetsons, Monsanto, home of the future, or the dystopian cyberpunk Hong Kong future that sells movies like Terminator. And so there's this new term called protopian futures, which is just not utopian or dystopian. It's the idea that you could have multiple futures. I think a lot of people like the United States because there's a freedom that every state is different. It's based on the Greek city-states, and you can move and have different character in each of these places. But one size fits all is like, or personalized to you, it's like, wait, I want to be able to make my own world. And I think everybody seeks that and remembers that too. And when we don't, it's that.
What are the tools for envisioning protopian futures?
Oh, you gotta have Monica on this show. They're really great. A lot of the tools are, when I found like there's like an organization called like the Society for Future Architects. Envisioning in the protopic futures is like, it's gonna sound silly, but like if you're white and you have any sort of notion of like living in a condo, or like you have ideas about how things are, just be quiet for a while and invite a group of very weird people to come in and talk, especially from places like Nigeria. Like Nigerians are like super awesome with technology and they're really interesting. And if you can get more of a global perspective and you can also listen to people, like we have forgotten how to listen. Like there are indigenous people who are like, well, we're not telling you a story because you don't know how to listen. You can't even listen to a tree. It's telling you something. Like, can't you see time, or do you only see like, oh no, like the idea that we can't see time and that we have to have like a sensor in our fridge to tell us when the banana has gone bad. It's like, come on, like you can't even see the peel.
Oh my God.
So all of the answers are totally there for the future, and the future is really the past, plus a little bit of the high tech stuff, but it's about way less stuff. It's about working with your environment and stewarding it and restoring it. It's not sustainability, it's restoration. And it's about knowing the things in your world, like understanding and appreciating the tree. The problem is that even that in a kind of capitalist society has been turned into like some hippie BS. It's like, oh, I listen to a tree. Oh, well, you're a hippie. We're not going to listen to you. You have soft thoughts. It's like, wait a second. Like, this is how the whole world ran with humans for the last 10,000 years. And now we're going to ignore that. And it's not going to be that there's no money to be made in that. It turns out if you work with nature, your return on investment is like 1,000x. So like there's no excuses. It's just that we've forgotten these things. We don't want to listen. And there's a handful of people that still remember them. And it's not just like, I'm going to ask a Native American person. It's like, what? There's like 50 tribes. Don't even. But you ask people in every single, geographic region. And you have indigenous people in one geographic region that import to another one because climate change has turned one climate region into another one. And you say, can you help us remember how to plant things? And I think there's a lot of that, hopefully, that's going to go on because it's just better.
It seems like one of the ways that we get that kind of empathy for other cultures is by traveling. It's hard to travel now. Like, do you think there's a like VR empathy machine?
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah. VR, like I've been working on some startups for like VR and physical therapy, VR and like mindfulness. There is definitely a VR empathy machine that you can use where you experience like what it's like to be in a bread line and somebody stabbing somebody. They're very upsetting, right? but it's really hard.
I more wanted to see Nigerians' view of the world and seeing time more than
okay. The best thing to do is if you can get an invite to Clubhouse, there's a ton of Nigerians on there, and they have like these, you can make whatever form you want. It's an audio-based social network, so you're not physically, you don't need to be an image, and a lot of people just listen. But the problem with like having a VR solution is like that still has to be built by people who are in VR. And if Nigerians built their own VR, heck yeah. But if they had to have a conduit of like some important white person to like translate their thing, like very few people get their ideas through in VR because it's a complicated mess to build anything. But if you know, augmented reality is also audio. You know, virtual reality is also reading a book. So if you listen and you become a part of like, and you research and you pay attention, super cool stuff happens, especially if you like eat the food and like understand like what it's made of. And I think that, and like the stories in history, I just think eventually there's going to be some equation that flips where companies are looking at their bottom line and they're saying, okay, we're a publicly traded company, we're required to like exponentially grow. Private companies don't have that. But what if, you know, what's a better equation? And when they're like, at some point, nature and working with nature becomes more profitable. I know that a lot of companies, a lot of oil companies and like things in Norway are investing in tons of renewables. It's just that their initial investment in the oil rig is a 20-year write-off, and it's a lot of money. And so they have to like make sure that they run it into the ground before they can even afford to switch to a renewable. And renewables just aren't that affordable yet. And a lot of the stuff that we have in our world is totally not necessary, but it's being funded by public companies that have to keep growing. So if we said, let's just not have these companies that need to grow, then we wouldn't have a stock market, right? So it's, you know, at some point we have these inflection points where it's possible to change these things, and we don't design a whole new system. We kind of like either fall back or we come up with these clever things because of constraints. Like the fact that now we have all this Zoom and Zoom is really simple. It's like, okay, I've made real relationships with people over Zoom during this pandemic that I never could have talked to before because they're like a hedge fund manager and they don't have the time of day. But I think that during this inflection point, we did have the ability to see what would work better for like remote learning. And in the future, at some emergency drastic inflection point, we'll have opportunities to redesign specific systems as well. And it will be the people from the underground and the protest communities and the mutual aid communities that never had societies that really cared for them in the first place that will be bringing the most innovations at the ground level. And if we listen to them, we'll have the solution for what we need to do in the future.
Amen.
I'm gonna have to, amen. That's really good. I'm gonna have to jump in because we're getting, we have gone the longest we've ever gone, and good, an absolutely amazing Thursday, and I can't thank you enough, Amber and David, for spending the time with us and our audience and having a conversation. And then we record these, so this will be up in the world and out to be discussed and commented on. Our questions will be out there. This has been just absolutely amazing, phenomenal, as expected, or even beyond expected, as far as the types of things that we've covered. Fascinating in every way. So